But we do have our incoming speaker, T.W. Shannon, with us today. And man, I appreciate you being here.
Oh, my honor, Mr. Chairman. It's always an honor to come to the headquarters and see where the action happens.
World headquarters.
Yeah,
world
absolutely.
Headquarters of the, as we say, the world headquarters of the reddest state in the country.
Amen.
The epicenter right here. But the way this works is as you all know, watching as well, we have people submit questions either via Twitter or on our Facebook page ahead of time. People that have questions for you. We've had Governor Fallon and Barisi recently. We've had Todd Lamb on. So again, we're very honored to have you and to talk about kind of this upcoming session and what to expect. But I do have to start with some people know what the quote Speaker of the House does, but I guess I have to start there. You were your colleagues elected you, and I think that's important to note that you have a lot of colleagues. We have the largest majority that we've ever had in the House, and your colleagues elected you Speaker of the House. What does the Speaker of the House do?
I actually get this question a lot. Funny you would ask. Essentially, the Speaker of the House is the presiding officer for the House of Representatives, meaning that my job is to make sure that we maintain order both on the floor and also within the committee structure, and to make sure that whatever legislation is moving through, that it gets through, and to essentially be the chief negotiating officer, if you will, with the governor's office and with the Senate, so that we can come together with a compromise. Of course, under the Oklahoma Constitution, the one instruction that the legislative branch has is to have a balanced budget. So we have to do that every year. The Constitution holds the Speaker and the rest of the members of the House of Representatives responsible for crafting that budget. And the Speaker's job is to make sure it gets done.
Okay, all right. And certainly the negotiations that will be going on. I mean, we have these large majorities, but I think that's a good point that, while we have these large majorities, we're not trying to ramrod or force legislation through. There is compromise still in the Oklahoma legislature, and that takes some leadership skills to be able to do that for sure.
Well, it's certainly when you compare to what's happening in Washington, D.C. with absolute gridlock, you compare to what happens in Oklahoma every single year where we do balance our budget, where we come together, we make tough choices in tough times, but we also invest in areas where we know that we need to, like core government services. I think we've got a lot to be proud of in Oklahoma. When you look at where we've been compared to the rest of the nation, whether it's our unemployment rate here in Oklahoma City and abroad within the state, or you look at just all of the economic indicators, since Republicans have taken over the majority, we've seen those indicators continue to increase, and I think that's something we can be proud of.
That's good. That's good. Certainly, and we've been championing this, of course. The only Republican African American Speaker of the House in the entire country. That would be you. Is there an added responsibility there? I mean, do you? I mean, you're getting a lot of national attention because of this. Is there an added responsibility there, or a burden or anything that you feel? Certainly. Being thrust into, right off the bat, a national figure, not only Speaker of the House, but the only African American Republican Speaker of the House. I know you worked under J.C. Watts and saw J.C. kind of go through some of these things. I mean, J.C. number 3 in leadership in Congress.
Sure.
A very prominent African American in our party that is able to. Certainly, that just rose through the ranks. Is there an added responsibility there, do you feel, or anything that you are wanting to champion in this role?
Certainly it's an honor anytime you can be unique and hopefully change maybe the conversation. It's an honor to get to do it. But my real focus and the real burden I have is from the people of District 62. Sure. To make sure that I'm representing the values that they sent me to Oklahoma City to represent. And now as Speaker-elect, my focus it expands a little, and certainly we're going to be looking statewide about what are the issues that are most important in Oklahoma. We know that Oklahoma, as you mentioned, is the reddest state in the union. We're a conservative state, and we expect a conservative, pro-growth, limited government agenda, and I think that's what we're going to have. And so I'm very, very confident that it also, I think, my election as Speaker-elect is reflective of a really diverse caucus. You look at where we are, of course, as you know, this week or last week we named Pam Peterson, the floor leader of the Oklahoma House of Representatives, a very critical role that helps decide which bills go to the floor and how they'll go.
The first woman in state history.
First woman in state history.
Happens to be a Republican.
Happens to be a Republican and a very capable person. And the thing about Representative Peterson, she's a fantastic member. No one questions her credibility or her judgment or her integrity, and she's just a capable person. And I think that's what people are looking for. Oklahoma's always been a place of opportunity. It's never mattered, it shouldn't have ever mattered what you look like or where you came from. If you're willing to work hard, if you're willing to adopt the values that are important to this area, you can do well in this state, and that needs to be our message. And I think it is.
It's a good point. It's a good point. On that note, Lily DeRoss on our Facebook page did ask, what is, and a lot of questions have been, this has come out after the presidential elections and these changing demographics that we've had, but what is our strategy to increase, diversity in seats across the state? I know that, certainly the recruitment of candidates, and that's a big burden on us as a state party as well. I mean, that's really, it's our job, but as Speaker, is that something that you guys are actively looking at? I mean, you've mentioned a little bit. I mean, the women that we have in our caucus, but also some more diversity within our party moving forward.
I think the real answer is that we have to be committed to not just being right. You mentioned J.C. Watts, my mentor. He used to say a lot that, conservatives are just content with being right. Not only do we have to be right, but we have to have an effective communication strategy. Yes, we're right on life. Yes, we're right on the Second Amendment. Yes, we're right on business. Yes, we're right on taxes. But you got to aggressively go out and communicate that to the masses. And I think that's where we've fallen short. Certainly, I see that as part of my role. I think it's part of the responsibility of being Speaker, and also as being a member of the Republican Party, that we've got to go out and communicate to groups that we haven't communicated to before. And I think that we're going to do that. So I think the future is bright in Oklahoma, certainly.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Again, largest majority that we've ever had in the House, and it certainly takes someone, I think, with some leadership skills. This is a lot of, over 70 members in the House. I mean, on the day-to-day basis, trying to get that many members on board, and I talk a lot about to people about this. It's not like all of these 70 plus members, Republicans, have the exact same agenda. They're all elected from, as you said, different House districts. They're all running for different reasons. What does that look like? I mean, promoting legislation and getting that many members on board. I'm certainly that's got to take some a skill set that's very unique.
We certainly have a diverse caucus, and I think that's the first thing you have to recognize is that we are a diverse caucus. We've got, sometimes I walk down the halls of the Capitol and they've got pictures of former legislatures and former legislators, and you look at it and it looks like a pretty homogenous group. Mostly everybody on that picture was a male. Most everybody was from, probably rural Oklahoma. Most of them were, middle to older gentlemen. But, you look at our caucus now, we've got members from the age of 21 all the way to the age of mid-70s. We've got, both genders represented. We've got, different nationalities, certainly different faiths, and certainly demographic, regional differences. But at the end of the day, if you focus on the things that unite us, things like limited government, the idea of advancing, freedoms that men and women have died for, the opportunity for economic development, those things that we believe in as a party. If we'll focus on those, the things we agree on, I think that the differences are so small that we can have some success.
Yeah, those bedrock conservative principles, for sure. Well, let's get into some legislation here and some of these big issues. A lot of people asking questions on. Again, questions have been submitted in advance on Facebook or Twitter. Income tax. Certainly, last session, we had a bill. We had lots of bills. There were lots of bills being juggled out there on income tax, whether we phase the income tax out, whether we just continue to cut the rate. Where are we at? I mean, do you sense that the income tax is going to consume, again, most of the session, or there will be a lot of other legislation as well, but kind of where are we right now with the income tax in Oklahoma?
I might talk a little bit about where we're not. I looked at, I remember reading last session and visiting with my friend Connie Conway. She's the incoming minority leader in California, the House of Representatives. She's the Republican leader. And she told me that their discussions in California about the income tax were about moving it from 10% to possibly 15%. And so we're not doing that in the Oklahoma legislature. In fact, last year, what you heard all both bodies saying, and also the governor's office saying, we need to reduce taxes in Oklahoma to be more competitive.
Right.
Now, we had some disagreement about how you pay for that. I'm confident that we're going to vet that through the system, that there's still a commitment to lower taxes in Oklahoma, but that we'll do it with a commitment to keeping core government services, but that we'll also figure out a strategy of how we pay for it responsibly. Because at the end of the day, there is some concern about what's going to happen with the fiscal cliff. We know that a lot more burden is going to be shifted to state government, and so we need to be prepared there also, because what we know for sure is that we can't continue to wait for the federal government to lead, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in education, or whether it's in areas of infrastructure. There's going to be real reform in the country. It's going to happen in the halls of state capitals, like at 23rd and Lincoln. So I'm confident we're going to have some agreement on our tax reduction, and also seeing what our tax policy overall looks like.
Okay. And one of the things, and this is more of just the logistics of it, but a lot of that income tax debate and a bill came right towards the end of session, and a lot of people were talking about if we could come together earlier in the session so that we have more time to vet these, and I'm glad you're saying that, because I think you're talking about, listen, this needs to be vetted earlier in the session and not the last week. Because a lot of that was going on the last week, and we didn't want to rush it, which I think was the right decision, not to rush a bill through. But certainly that's good to hear that the debate will start early, so that we have something sooner rather than later moving forward. Certainly, again, another question that comes up a lot. You go ask any business owner what's one of the biggest barriers to growth in Oklahoma. It's workers' comp. Gosh, I mean, I remember working on campaigns a decade ago, where this was still the #1 issue, and I'm sure decades before that it was still an issue to business owners. Where are we at on workers' comp reform? Is that something that we're going to see moving forward in the legislature this session?
Oh, I absolutely believe we will. We've already formed a working group in conjunction with the Senate. Brian Bingman actually led the discussion on it, and Fred Jordan is serving as kind of the House member. There was a bill last year that actually fell in the House. I supported it. It was the opt-out bill, and I certainly support it again, or whatever measure. What we have to have is fundamental wholesale change and reform in our workers' compensation system. And so I'm open to whatever solution will provide lower premiums and also encourage people to get back to work, because the biggest challenge we have with the workers' compensation system is that it discourages people from returning to work. And that's a broken system. I don't care what the system is. We should be encouraging people to work harder, work more, so that they can provide a sense of prosperity and an opportunity for the families. And so I'm confident we'll have some reform this session. I think it'll be a holistic approach about how we do it, and I think that there'll be a discussion about all options are on the table about how do we get there.
Well, and those companies in California that are seeing as you said, their taxes going up and looking for states to relocate, certainly, we're a right to work state, that's great, but we also want to, if we can we make changes in workers' comp, where it makes us that much more appealing to other states, I'm sure.
Yeah, I agree.
Obamacare. Lots of questions on that. And I think where we're at right now is just the unknown, okay? Mary Fallin, in our opinion, made the right decision on that, not to implement those exchanges, to send that money back. I think you're seeing at a national level a federal government that's wanting states to really bail them out, frankly. Mary said, listen, sleep in the bed that you made essentially with Obamacare and these exchanges, but still lots of questions out there remain. Let's start with just that federal legislation and the exchanges, and then on top, the secondary on that is just the Medicaid expansion. And I know that you had said that, listen, we need a state solution to that. We understand that there needs to be reforms to that. But let's start with the health exchanges and Obamacare. Again, what do you see coming down the pipe, in session on that issue?
Well, I'm so proud of our Governor Fallin, for standing up for Oklahoma and Oklahoma businesses and saying that we would not be pursuing the idea of setting up a state exchange in Oklahoma. I absolutely believe that was the right decision, and I know that moving forward, there's going to be an effort among many members of the House. We've already formed a working group on this issue to come up with what is the Oklahoma solution. How do we, on our Medicaid system, how do we continue to reform what is a broken system? Because while it's okay, it's the right thing to do to reject Obamacare, it's not the right thing to do to reject Obamacare and then sit around and wait and keep the status quo, because we do have a broken system right now, and it's a system that we have too many people on Medicaid as it is. And, well, there was a movement to put more on it, and I thought that's not compassion. That's not how you define compassion, by putting more people on Medicaid. You define it by how many people you get off of Medicaid,
absolutely,
and put them back to work. And so I think you're going to find, we've come up with about 10 options, I think, that we're looking at how we can make this system work, because we should provide for the least among us. We do recognize that. But,
yes,
for instance, in our Medicaid system right now, with these hard cutoff lines, we actually discourage people from going to work. We discourage people because they don't want to lose their Medicaid benefit. And so maybe some type of gradual system, asking the federal government to really go to a block grant model, so that we can make the decisions for Oklahomans, because I think Oklahomans know best what's right for Oklahoma.
Yeah, well, I think that's key, but and I'm glad, again, we're being proactive. That's key. The fact that Oklahomans know that we're being proactive. We're not just saying no to the federal government. We're being proactive about a state solution.
Exactly,
I think
right.
that's key. Absolutely key. Okay, so you answered the Medicaid issue. A question from Kadosha Fish on our Twitter account. What will you do for Oklahoma to become a more sovereign state by using the 10th Amendment?
Yeah, we formed the 10th Amendment Committee this session. I just announced my new committee structure for the House of Representatives, and I think that Oklahoma's sovereign, that we've got to, with this impending, movement by the federal government to be more involved in the lives of Oklahomans and Americans. I think there is going to come a time where Oklahoma has to draw a line in the sand, and I think we should proactively be looking at options of how we can assert our authority. Our Constitution was very clear that the U.S. Congress has enumerated powers, the federal government has enumerated powers, and that those that aren't enumerated, they don't have, and
sure,
they belong to the state, and certainly while protecting individual liberties. And so I think that starting a committee is going to be headed up by Representative Lewis Moore,
okay,
from Arcadia, to make sure that we're looking at and examining what is the proper role of the federal government within the lives of Oklahoma. Certainly there is a role. I mean, I don't think that anyone, certainly that I've talked to in the legislature, thinks that we should be talking succession. I think that that's outrageous, and I'm disappointed that other states have gone that direction. However, I do think that there are opportunities for the states to say, listen, like for instance, our Attorney General's the lawsuit that he's fighting right now to protect groups like Hobby Lobby. I mean, you talk about an issue that that goes to the core of who we are as people. Standing up for religious liberties, that should be one. And so I think this committee will give us at least a platform to start discussing these issues and looking at them with a real focus. So I think that'll be a start.
I think it's great. Now, what's the name of the committee again?
It's called the 10th. I'm sorry. It's called the States' Rights Committee.
States' Rights Committee.
That will be its sole function, to
Great.
Examine, how do we keep and protect Oklahoma's sovereignty.
And Lewis Moore will be heading that up.
Representative Moore will, yes, sir.
Great. Deborah, on our Facebook page, what's being done to address, and again, this is something that I'm not sure how much pressure we can put on here, but how much is being done to address the stalled farm bill at the congressional level? Agriculture is a huge part of our economy. So, I know there has been, and again, this is kind of the unknown. We're kind of in no man's land on that farm bill. Certainly, obviously, Oklahoma, big agricultural state. If maybe talk a little bit about kind of what we're doing at a state level, and if there is any communication that we're sending to DC on that farm bill.
You bet. Well, certainly I can see very easily that there would be some type of resolution supporting the movement of a farm bill from the Oklahoma legislature, which would make the will of the legislature known. We haven't had specific discussions about that, but certainly if Congress hadn't moved by that point, I can see very easily movement being led in the House to do that, because not only is agriculture just part of our economic base, but frankly, it's part of our heritage. It's part of who we are as a state. And so we recognize that if we're going to have a strong Oklahoma, we're going to have a strong Oklahoma City.
Sure.
We've got to have a strong Tulsa, Mr. Chairman, and we've got to have a strong rural Oklahoma. The three all go together, and they're all important. And so making sure that we have a competitive tax base, I think, is a big part of it. Making sure that we've got first-class schools in rural Oklahoma. Making sure that we have roads and bridges that lead you to rural Oklahoma, and that's been a big success, I think, that's started in the House initially since 2004 when Republicans took over. We've all seen the results of our neglected infrastructure system in Oklahoma. In 2004, when the Republican majority took over, it was the House of Representatives that said roads and bridges are a priority. It's the right place to invest state dollars. It's the one place where economic development intersects with public safety. We should be driving resources there. And I had a bill last session, two bills, one that focused specifically on county governments, which benefited rural Oklahoma, that increased the amount of state dollars and appropriations that we put there. So making sure that, you know, within the means of government's proper role, that we're doing all that we can to incentivize rural Oklahoma to thrive and be productive, whether it's through proper funding of education and also through our economic development efforts as it relates to roads and bridges. I think those are the most important things.
And I know that Governor Fallon had put out there just kind of this goal to on bridges in particular too, and that's and it was a 10-year plan, I believe. 8 years. Yeah. Okay, so we're in the midst of that 8 years right now.
We have. Governor Fallon signed my bill last year that essentially will, you know, Oklahoma has been #1 in structurally deficient bridges for decades. Yeah. We had the most in the nation. We were #1. Well, after the signage of this bill that Governor Fallon led the initiative on, we will move from being the #1 state with structurally deficient bridges to being number 50. It's a bracket you want to be number 50.
Yeah, that's right.
At the end of the 8 years, and so I think it's something we can be very proud of. It's a proper role of government, something that government should be doing.
Right.
And I think we'll continue the momentum as it relates to infrastructure.
Good. Any other legislation that I may not have mentioned, or big issues that are going to be taking up a lot of time in the headlines maybe next session that I haven't touched on?
I think one that I plan to champion is pension reform in Oklahoma. We have neglected for a long time our pension systems in Oklahoma, and certainly Representative McDaniel led an effort last session that was successful in the last couple of sessions actually with some reforms, and I think we want to keep the momentum there, making sure that we, #1, keep our commitments to our retired state employees and to teachers around and firefighters. Yeah. We certainly need a commitment, and that's the starting point, but also recognizing that the world has changed, and these defined benefit plans they've gone out of the private sector. No one in the private sector did it. They all got out of them in the 80s and 90s for a reason. And so I think really looking at how we can transform our pension system while keeping our commitments to current state employees who will be receiving benefits, I think that's going to be a big part of the discussion, as it should be, because we don't know what's going to happen from the federal government. With all the talks of the fiscal cliff, with all the uncertainty out of Washington, D.C., and with such a heavy dependency, frankly, on state government of federal resources, we need to put the state in its best position to be prepared to meet core government services. And I think making sure that our pension liability system, that we've made it and strengthened it as much as we can within reason, I think that's part of that due diligence that we owe the citizens of Oklahoma.
That's good. Okay. And where can people go to, your website, or to access, the legislation that's going through the House? I mean, I know you guys have great websites it's a very transparent process now to be able to go on and access this legislation. But give the folks a couple websites that they can access.
The first one would be www.okhouse.gov, and we're adding a new feature. It's a pilot project that we're partnering with the company to make it even more accessible, so that you can have direct conversation with your member based on their web page there on the House website. In fact, I just did my first video. It'll be interactive. We're launching that this session because, again, you're right, transparency is what it's about. We should be accountable to the people that sent us there, making sure that they're involved. I think we just get a better product. So that's the one website. And of course, always coming to the state party website is a great place for resources too, and it's a great place to donate money.
There's a donate tab right there on the front. Thank you, Speaker, for that. And that is OKGOP.com, and certainly. We have a lot of people that access, our archive of these videos. We have a Ustream account where you can access all of these as well. Any closing remarks or anything else that I haven't touched on?
I would just add that in Oklahoma, when you look at where we are right now, we're so well positioned to not just compete, but to be a leader in the United States. Is a great place to raise families. A great place to start a business, and we need to just be about telling our story and continue the momentum so that we can not only compete, but we can win. We've discovered that, and much like the Oklahoma Thunder, we don't just want to be in the room and compete. We can actually go win, and I think the state is well positioned to do that, and it'll take us all working together. And you have a commitment from me as the next speaker to do just that, to work across the aisles even, to come up with pro-growth solutions that value our core commitment to limited government.
Well, Speaker, I appreciate the time very much, and look forward to a great session. and our doors are always open for you.
Thank you.
And your colleagues. So again, congratulations on becoming the new speaker, and good luck on a great session. Thank you all for watching, either live or those that are accessing our podcast here series. And we will see you back in January. We will be announcing our next speaker here in a couple weeks for our OKGOP Facebook Town Hall Series. Thank you all very much.